All right, let's jump right into this because what a match we have to break down today. We are looking at the massively anticipated 2026 World Cup Group I opener. You've got powerhouse France taking on a fiercely determined Senegal at MetLife Stadium. And going into this one, the tension wasn't just about grabbing those crucial 3 points. No. It was completely wrapped up in this really heavy history between the two nations. So in this explainer, we are going to unpack exactly how a match that honestly looked like it was heading for a historic disaster for France turned into an absolute record-breaking masterclass by Kylian Mbappé. To really understand the weight of this game, you have to ask yourself, could lightning actually strike twice, 24 years later? Because if you think back to 2002, we witnessed one of the most shocking upsets in World Cup history. Senegal defeated the reigning world champions France 1-0 in their opening match in Seoul. I mean, that single goal literally sent Dakar into a national holiday, and it left a lingering trauma for Les Bleus. It's the only other time these two nations have ever met at a major tournament. Heading into this 2026 matchup, France had never beaten Senegal. The historical stakes here were just absolutely massive. And get this, there is a literal, direct human thread bridging these two eras. Back in 2002, Senegal's current head coach, Mbappé was a 20-year-old kid sitting on the bench watching his teammates pull off that unbelievable 1-0 upset. Now fast forward to 2026, and he is the man pacing the dugout, trying to architect that exact same magic all over again. And for the first 45 minutes, man, it really looked like Thiao's magic was working. The first half was just a complete mess for France. Despite throwing out an attack with Mbappé, Ousmane Dembélé, and Michael Olise, they looked entirely disjointed. Honestly, they played like a group of guys who had literally never met before. There was just this shocking lack of connective tissue in the final third. You had players constantly misreading each other's routes, passing to the wrong foot. It was rough.
Senegal came dangerously close to repeating history right then and there. France was suffering from these slapstick miscommunications. Think about this. Kylian Mbappé alone lost the ball 7 times. 7. It was undoubtedly one of his worst individual halves in recent memory. Meanwhile, Senegal is out there executing this suffocating, cohesive press. They were cutting right through the French lines. Nicolas Jackson ended up hitting the near post, and Ismail Assar sent a massive chance flying over the bar. So going into the tunnel, an upset didn't just feel possible, it felt imminent.
Facing the very real threat of 2002 happening all over again, France's manager Didier Deschamps knew he had to change things up. After the game, he essentially said, look, from time to time you do have a rough start. It's quite hard to meet the high expectation at a World Cup. And that perfectly frames the reality of that halftime locker room. Deschamps, a guy who hasn't lost an opener in years, recognized that his defensive setup, which had players slightly out of position, just wasn't working. He had to pivot, and he had to pivot hard.
So, to finally unlock his offense, Deschamps makes this crucial 3-step tactical tweak. Step 1, he moves Michael Olise into the middle of the pitch. Step 2, he shifts Ousmane Dembélé over to his more natural position on the right wing. And step 3, he tells him to dial up the intensity and just let these world-class forwards do what they do best, run straight at the defense in transition. It sounds like a simple restructuring, but the impact? Absolutely explosive. Literally, the second the whistle blew for the second half, the entire momentum shifted. Those structural changes paid immediate dividends. Suddenly, you've got Olise finding all this space centrally, which forces a brilliant save from Senegal's keeper, Edouard Mendy. We also had a super controversial moment when Sadio Mané put a heavy tackle on Mbappé right in the box. Now, to a lot of people, it looked like a stone-cold penalty, but the referee and VAR waved it off. But France, they didn't even care. They were not discouraged because they had finally found their rhythm.
So, that brings us to the 66th minute, and I want you to let this number, 57, sink in for a second. Michael Olise, totally thriving in his new central role, spins into space and slides this perfectly paced diagonal pass right against the grain. Mbappé makes a devastating run across the goal and just calmly slots it past Mendy. He even pulled out that promised flute-playing celebration. But way more importantly, that strike was Mbappé's 57th international goal, which officially tied Olivier Giroud for the all-time French scoring record.
And you know how it goes. Once that breakthrough happens, the floodgates swing wide open. We get an absolutely chaotic final stretch. In the 82nd minute, substitute Bradley Barcola gets fed by Adrien Rabiot and delicately chips it in for a 2-0 lead. It feels like it's over, right? Well, deep into stoppage time at 90+5, Senegal's 18-year-old Ibrahim Baye blasts this fantastic goal to make it 2-1. Suddenly, there's the threat of a dramatic comeback. But literally 1 minute later, at 90+6, Mbappé violently shuts the door.
And that brings us to the magic number, 58. Deep in stoppage time, Olise is fighting through this massive Senegalese scrum, and he somehow feeds Mbappé up the middle. From about 30 yards out, without even a second of hesitation, Mbappé unleashes an absolute screamer. The ball dips viciously right under the crossbar, leaving Mendy completely helpless. It was just a spectacular, awe-inspiring finish that definitively rewrote the history books, secured a 3-1 victory, and crowned Mbappé as the undisputed scoring king of France.
To truly grasp the magnitude of what we just watched, put it in perspective. Mbappé now stands completely alone at the mountaintop, with 58 goals. He's officially surpassed Olivier Giroud at 57 and legendary, iconic figures like Thierry Henry at 51. To achieve this while still right in the prime of his career, and to break the record with such an emphatic, long-range strike in a World Cup opener, it's simply staggering. If you look up masterclass in the dictionary, this is it. It was a performance by an absolute expert demonstrating the highest level of skill, especially when it comes to overcoming adversity. Deschamps hit the nail on the head post-match. Mbappé was ruthlessly efficient. Because remember, he had a genuinely terrible first half. He was losing the ball constantly. Yet his innate ability to tip the scales in an instant, to just completely take over a game despite struggling early on, proves exactly why he is widely considered the best forward in world football today.
Reflecting on his historic night, Mbappé's post-match words were so telling. He said, "I play to make my mark on my country's history, to ensure my team reaches the final and wins the World Cup. The rest will simply be part of who I am and my career." That completely encapsulates his mindset. The individual records, yeah, they are amazing, but they are just a byproduct of his relentless drive to push Les Bleus to the absolute pinnacle of global football.
And that leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought. Mbappé now sits at 14 total World Cup goals across his tournaments. He is just 2 goals shy of Miroslav Klose's all-time global record of 16. With the rest of the 2026 group stage still ahead of him, starting with matches against Iraq and Norway, it really feels less like a question of if and more a question of when. Will this be the tournament where Mbappé claims the ultimate global scoring crown? Keep your eyes on the pitch. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.